Let me tell you about the archaeology of a life. You don't see it when you look at James and me now. You see a couple in their late 50s, maybe early 60s, in a nice but not flashy home in a good but not gated suburb. You see a man who prefers gardening to golf. A woman whose hands still bear the faintest traces of paint and soil under the nails, no matter how well she scrubs. You see comfort. You see stability. What you don't see are the layers, the strata. The basement apartment we lived in for 3 years where the heat would cut out, and we'd huddle under every blanket we owned. You don't see the second-hand furniture we stripped and refinished ourselves, learning as we went, staining our fingers and arguing over varnish. You don't see the years of packed lunches, of driving a car until its size sounded like a death rattle, of saving coins in a giant glass jar for a someday holiday that felt like a fairy tale. You see the finished pottery on the shelf. You don't see the raw clay, the spinning wheel, the kiln fires, the cracks we had to mend. Our life is a piece we built, hand-thrown and glazed by us. We know its weight, its balance, every imperfection that makes it ours. We are not poor. We are rich in a currency she could never understand. But Chloe only understood price tags. Our son Ben brought her home for the first time last autumn. She was a vision of curated perfection. Hair the color of spun honey, cut in a blunt bob that probably cost more than our first month's rent on that basement apartment. Her clothes were the kind of quiet luxury that screams its expense in whispers of exquisite tailoring and fabric that moved like water. She was polite. Oh, so perfectly, coldly polite. She called me Mrs. Miller in this clipped, clear tone. She examined our home not with curiosity, but with a kind of benign audit. Her eyes lingered on James's beloved, slightly shabby armchair by the fireplace, on the inherited but mismatched china in our cabinet, on the art on our walls, most of it by local artists we'd befriended, or pieces I'd painted myself. She didn't say anything negative. She didn't have to. The slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her smile was commentary enough. She was from what she called the heights, literally and figuratively. Old money. The kind where wealth isn't discussed because it's as assumed as oxygen. Ben was smitten. He's a good boy, a good man, smart, kind, an engineer with a solid head on his shoulders. But he's also a romantic, and Chloe was a novel, a beautiful, glossy novel written in a language he didn't quite speak but found thrilling. We held our tongues. We wanted him to be happy. We practiced radical acceptance, as my yoga friend would say. We bit back the questions about her career vague, something in brand consultancy. Her family, her father was in finance, her mother was on boards, and her apparent lack of ability to load a dishwasher. The anniversary dinner was James's idea. Let's do it properly, he'd said. Just a few friends, that Italian place downtown we like. Carlo's isn't the most expensive restaurant in the city, but it's ours. We've been going there for 25 years. We celebrated promotions there, consoled each other over losses there. Carlo himself still comes out to hug us. It's not fine dining in the Michelin sense. It's fine dining in the sense of warmth, of familiarity, of knowing James likes his steak Florentine cooked a precise way, and that I will always order the tiramisu. It is a place rich in memory, which to us is the highest form of wealth. The night arrived. Our friends, Mike and Sarah, were there, friends from the very beginning, who remember the basement apartment. Ben and Chloe arrived last. She wore a little black dress that was indeed little and black and probably had a name like La Perla or Victoria Beckham. It was a dress that belonged in a different kind of room. She looked around Carlo's warm, bustling, slightly noisy dining room with the faintest hint of a wince, as if the laughter was too loud, the checked tablecloths too quaint. Dinner progressed. Chloe was charming to Mike and Sarah, asking questions about their lives with a detached, anthropological interest. She talked a lot about her recent trip to Mykonos, about the shocking state of the airport, about the darling little villa they'd rented. James listened, nodding politely, squeezing my hand under the table. I could feel his quiet amusement. We'd spent our honeymoon camping in the rain in the Lake District. We still laugh about it. Then came dessert. Carlo, bless him, brought out a special tiramisu for the table with a sparkler in it, making a lovely, cheesy fuss. We were all laughing, clapping. It was a moment of pure, unvarnished joy. And that's when it happened. Chloe leaned over, placing her cool, manicured hand on top of mine. Her expression was one of performative, condescending kindness. And she said it. Her voice cut through the warm chatter, clear and deliberate. "This is so lovely," she said, her eyes wide with faux sincerity. "It's just so brave of you to have it here. At a proper restaurant. Most people in your position would have just done a little backyard barbecue. It's really quite sweet." The table went silent. Not a dramatic, record scratch silence, but a thick, viscous quiet. Mike choked on his wine. Sarah's fork hovered midair. Ben's face drained of all color, his eyes wide with horrified comprehension. "Chloe," he hissed. "James, my dear James," just slowly put down his espresso cup. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued, like a scientist who has just had a hypothesis confirmed. My hand under hers did not tremble. I looked at her perfectly smooth face, at the pity in her eyes that was so genuine it was chilling. She truly believed she was being kind. She truly believed she was acknowledging our noble effort to rise above our station. In that moment, I didn't see a malicious villain. I saw a profoundly impoverished young woman. A pauper of the soul. I smiled. I actually smiled. I gently slid my hand out from under hers. "Thank you, Chloe," I said, my voice calm, warm even. "That's so thoughtful of you to notice. We do love our barbecues too. James makes a mean burger." I let the moment hang, let the absurdity of her statement fill the space. Then I turned the conversation, asking Sarah about her daughter's upcoming recital. The spell was broken, but the atmosphere was fractured. The rest of the evening was a polite, strained performance. In the car home, James was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Our position." I replied, "Yes, our position." He chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "Well, she's drawn her map of the world. Quite a small map, isn't it?" "Tiny," I agreed. "And she thinks she's in the center of it." We didn't rage. We didn't plot some petty, mean-spirited revenge. That was beneath us, and frankly, a waste of the energy we'd spent a lifetime cultivating. But we also weren't going to let this stand. This was about more than an insult. This was about our son. This was about the values he might be sleepwalking into accepting. This was about showing him, and her, that the world she looked down upon was, in fact, the foundation upon which everything truly valuable was built. Our revenge wasn't going to be an act of malice. It was going to be an act of revelation. Phase 1 was intelligence gathering. Not through snooping, but through benign conversation. Over the next few weeks, when Ben visited, usually alone, Chloe was suddenly very busy. We asked gentle questions. We learned that Chloe's father, Charles, was a venture capitalist of the old school. That her mother, Penelope, was a philanthropist whose charity work was chronicled in society pages. That their identity was utterly enmeshed in their net worth, their address, their memberships. Their legacy was a financial one, not a human one. We learned Chloe had never held a job for more than a year. That she'd been cut off from a trust fund briefly in her early 20s for unbecoming behavior, and had fallen spectacularly in line since. She was, in essence, a beautifully maintained asset in her family's portfolio. James, over his morning coffee, would muse. "A venture capitalist, you say? Interesting." James is a retired civil engineer. He builds bridges, literal and figurative. He understands stress points, load-bearing capacity, and the elegance of a simple, perfect solution. The idea didn't come in a lightning bolt. It grew slowly, like one of his prized roses. It started with a phone call to Mike, who is in commercial real estate. Then a lunch with Sarah, who is a whiz at research and knows everyone in town. We weren't building a trap. We were building a context. The opportunity presented itself 2 months later. Ben mentioned, with some nervousness, that Chloe's parents had invited us to a cocktail party at their club. It's kind of a big deal, Ben said. Black tie. They want to meet you properly. The unspoken words hung in the air. They want to vet you. James and I looked at each other. A glint passed between us. The quiet, steady glint of a blade being honed, not for blood, but for a precise surgical cut. We'd be delighted, I said, smiling. The club was everything we expected. A Gilded Age monstrosity of marble, dark wood, and portraits of stern-faced men. The air smelled of old money, lemon polish, and subtle exclusion. Charles and Penelope were a matched set. Tall, lean, expensively maintained, with handshakes as cold and dry as autumn leaves. Their greeting was impeccably correct, devoid of warmth. They introduced us around as Ben's parents. The lack of our names a subtle erasure. We were appendages. Context for their daughter's boyfriend. We played our parts perfectly. I wore a simple but elegant navy dress I'd owned for a decade. James looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his rented tux. We were polite, quiet, observant. We listened as Charles held court about market volatility. As Penelope discussed the ordeal of renovating their summer house in the Hamptons. We saw the way they spoke to the wait staff, not with cruelty, but with a blankness, as if they were moving furniture. We saw Chloe in her element, preening under her parents' gaze, her laugh a little higher, her gestures more calculated. Ben stood beside her, looking like a man who had wandered into a play and forgotten his lines. Then, during a lull, Charles fixed James with a patronizing smile. So Ben tells me you're retired, James. What was it you did? Construction. James took a slow sip of his club soda. Civil engineering, he said, his voice mild. I worked on municipal infrastructure for 35 years. Water treatment plants, bridges, that sort of thing. Ah, practical work, Charles said, nodding as if to a child. Essential, I'm sure. Not very glamorous, but someone has to do it. Someone does, James agreed amiably. I was particularly proud of the Northridge Viaduct. It was a complex project. Geologically challenging. We used a novel composite material that saved the county millions and extended the lifespan by decades. He said it not boastfully, but with the quiet pride of a craftsman. Charles blinked, uncomprehending. A bridge was something you drove over, not something you built. He changed the subject to the golf course redesign the club was undertaking. Later, Penelope cornered me near a truly hideous potted palm. Elizabeth, your dress is so classic, she said. It's so refreshing to see someone embrace a timeless look. The subtext, dated, cheap, was painted in neon. Thank you, I said, touching the fabric. It's lasted so well. I believe in buying fewer things of better quality. It's more sustainable, don't you think? Less waste. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Irritation that her dig hadn't landed, and a hint of confusion at the word sustainable, used outside of a charity gala context. The evening was a masterclass in a certain kind of poverty. The poverty of connection, of curiosity, of substance. As we left, Charles clapped James on the shoulder. You're good people, he said, a dismissal masquerading as a compliment. In the car, James was silent again. Then, the Northridge Viaduct. I smiled. I know. The next day, Phase 2 began. It was time to stop being observers and start being, well, ourselves. But strategically, we invited Ben and Chloe for a casual Sunday lunch. Chloe, likely expecting paper plates in the backyard, arrived in designer jeans and a look of prepared endurance. The lunch was not casual. It was a masterpiece of quiet, unassailable wealth. Not monetary wealth. The wealth of a life deeply lived. I cooked. Not fancy canapes, but my grandmother's recipe for slow-braised short ribs, with vegetables from our own garden. The table was set with my mother's linen napkins, the ones I'd painstakingly restored, and the mismatched china that included a plate from my great-aunt's farmhouse. The centerpiece was a simple jug of flowers from the garden, lilacs, peonies, things you can't buy. The conversation was the weapon. We didn't talk about things. We talked about experiences. James described, in vivid loving detail, the 3 years it took to build the timber frame pergola over our patio. The sourcing of the oak, the learning of the joinery, the mistake that led to a better design. I talked about restoring the painting that hung in our dining room, a faded landscape I'd found at a flea market. Discovering the artist was a minor but wonderful local impressionist, and the journey of learning to clean and conserve it myself. We talked about the year we backpacked through Southeast Asia on a shoestring, the friends we'd made in a village in Laos and still wrote to. We talked about mentoring young engineers and artists, about the community garden we helped run, about the quiet satisfaction of a well-made thing, a well-nurtured connection, a well-lived day. We didn't boast. We simply were. We were living archives of skill, memory, and relationship. Chloe picked at her food. She couldn't engage. She had no frame of reference. She could discuss the best restaurant in Bali, but not the feeling of getting lost in a Balinese market and being invited to share a family's meal. She knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. Ben listened. He really listened. I could see the scales falling from his eyes. He was comparing the cold, perfunctory museum of Chloe's world to the warm, messy, vibrant workshop of ours. The coup de grace was an accident. Chloe, trying to find some common ground, gestured to a small, abstract sculpture on a side table. "That's an interesting piece," she said. "Is it tribal?" James smiled. That's a piece of the Northridge Viaduct." We all looked at him. He got up, fetched it, and placed it gently on the table. It was a jagged, beautiful chunk of concrete and rebar, fused with the novel composite material he'd mentioned. When the final section was poured, James said, his voice soft with reverence, they let the crew take a few souvenir pieces from the test batches. "This is mine. It's not art. It's a piece of the city's spine. It provided clean water to 200,000 people for 30 years. It's the most valuable thing I own." He handed it to Ben. Ben held the heavy, rough chunk in his hands, feeling its weight. He looked from the concrete to his father's face, to the pergola outside, to the painting on the wall. He was holding tangible proof of a legacy of building, of maintaining, of solving problems, of leaving something solid behind. Chloe looked at the dirty piece of concrete like it was radioactive. She literally recoiled. In that moment, the chasm was laid bare. It was unbridgeable. Ben and Chloe broke up a month later. He said it was mutual, that they wanted different things. We didn't pry. But the Sunday after, Ben came over alone. He helped James in the garden. He asked me to teach him how to make the short ribs. He was quiet, contemplative. He picked up the piece of the viaduct again. "It's heavier than it looks," he said. "The best things always are," James replied. That was our revenge. It was priceless because it had no price. It couldn't be bought, sold, or Instagrammed. It was the simple, unwavering act of living our truth in full, unapologetic color. We didn't insult Chloe back. We didn't expose her or humiliate her publicly. We simply showed her, and more importantly showed our son, the profound, layered, gritty, glorious richness of a life built, not inherited. A life of substance over status. Of calluses over cosmetics. Of love as a verb, something you do, in the building and the nurturing and the mending, not a sentiment you perform. We heard through the grapevine that Chloe is now dating the heir to a hotel chain. We wish her well. Truly. She is a prisoner in a gilded cage of her own making. And that is punishment enough. As for us, James and I sit on that hand-built pergola most evenings. We look at our garden, at the painting, at the piece of concrete on the shelf. We feel the quiet hum of a life that fits us perfectly, like a well-worn glove. We are not poor. We are the wealthiest people we know. Our revenge was to know that, to live that, and to let that knowledge be the only answer we ever gave. The ultimate luxury is a life that is truly your own. And that, my dears, is something no one can ever look down upon. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.